This is How About That Podcast, a show dedicated to all things Dallas Cowboys. With both objective and subjective perspectives, How About That Podcast is your place to hear about America's team. Now, here's Joseph Hoyt and Danny Morales.
All right, bonus episode of How About That Podcast, the first bonus episode. We recorded a podcast previously today, but then we heard some information come out in an ESPN article about one Bill Belichick and his possible connection to coaching again. Basically, the article is a great article from ESPN, and what they're kind of doing with the article is giving insight into the first offseason for Bill Belichick without being tied to the New England Patriots in a long time, and the potential of him becoming a coach again. He interviewed with Atlanta. We know that. So the article does a great job with that insight process. But it also had some nuggets that are very, very relevant to one Dallas Cowboys. And basically, I'm going to give you a couple quotes here, guys, from the story itself. Bill Belichick, quote, is believed to be biding his time until next January for openings on teams he had told confidants he would be interested in coaching: the Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles, and New York Giants. A source who spoke with longtime friend of Belichick said the friend wonders if the coach will have another opportunity, unquote, at all. Regular quote resumes, I don't think Bill Belichick will ever be a head coach again in the NFL, the friend said, unless it's for Jerry Jones. All right, let's kind of start our conversation there. We know that Mike McCarthy wasn't a guarantee to come back. He's going to be on his last year of his deal. Every coach for the Cowboys is on their last year of their deal. Danny, what does that initial quote from this article make you think about not only Bill Belichick's potential to maybe coach next season, but kind of what happened this offseason with Mike McCarthy?
Yeah, kind of twofold there. To be honest, I was surprised when Belichick did not land a coaching job this offseason. He seemed like this renowned, or he is. He's got the resume to prove it, this great coach with all his success. And it's a little concerning that nobody picked him up. It seemed like he was the logical fit for Atlanta. It seemed like there was some legs to that story. And he never put pen to paper, which was concerning. Relating that to the Cowboys, I wasn't sure if McCarthy was coming back. His future did not seem guaranteed. And that last playoff performance left a pretty sour taste in most Cowboys' mouths. It was bad. It just seemed like a team that had no energy, enthusiasm, and I think a lack of preparation showed on the field, which essentially whittles down to coaching, whether that's fair or not. And if you weren't going to bring in Belichick last year, why do it next year? But it does make me wonder, is Jerry and company trying to give McCarthy less to see more, if that makes sense? They want to see him prove it this year, but they're giving him nothing. Their star wide receiver hasn't reported yet. Dak's having his issues. Mike is having his issues. It just seems like a circus that he has to manage right now. And so to say that he's going to go after Belichick next year, maybe the writing's on the wall?
Potentially. I'm glad you brought up Mike McCarthy's coming season because, and we'll talk about this more ad nauseum, I think, and I'm curious as a Cowboy fan, but objectively, it's hard for me to judge Mike McCarthy on what happens this coming season because of how this offseason has transpired, to be frank. What do you think about just Mike McCarthy's coming season with this offseason? The point I'm making, is there a part of you that says, like, shoot, it's hard to, if they do the same thing they did last year, is it hard to judge him for that based on what was done this offseason moving forward?
The NFL is it's a what have you done for me lately kind of business. It's pretty cutthroat. It's, if you don't win, you're gone. And I think it would be unfair to criticize or to blame McCarthy for a 9 or a 10-win season based off of what they've given him. They've added essentially no impact players. What comes after the drafts and free agency remains to be seen, and who they draft. But with the arsenal he has now, they haven't really set him up to succeed.
No, and to your point, it's hard to manage a circus. And at the very least, this offseason has been a little wild in terms of all the things going on. Let's go back to the article really quick because there's some more information in there that I want to, get out there and then talk about. The article also had said, quote, Dallas was another potential suitor this offseason, and Belichick told a friend that he liked the idea of sticking it to the Crafts by working for Jones. Jerry Jones, it is. But Jones, for all his flash, bluster, and vows this offseason to go, quote, all in, is change averse when it comes to head coaches. He decided quickly after Dallas's blowout exit in the wild card round to let Mike McCarthy coach the final year of his contract. Another quote later on, Belichick has told confidence he thinks he'll get at least one interview next year. Dallas could be an option if Jerry Jones moves on from Mike McCarthy, a lame duck in the final year of his contract. Belichick has a strong relationship with both Jerry and Stephen Jones dating back years. On the other hand, Jerry Jones has been close with a lot of excellent head coaches whom he has never hired. Danny, what are your thoughts just hearing that? And it kind of, because there was some questions about whether or not Mike McCarthy was going to come back. A lot of questions. If Jerry decided pretty quickly early on, that's interesting, I think, after the blowout loss. What are your thoughts about not only hearing Jerry Jones being change averse for someone who's willing to go all in? That doesn't really surprise me considering what happened with Jason Garrett, obviously. But what are your thoughts on hearing those quotes?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easy reaction after a loss like that is to be emotional and say, I'm done with this guy. And I think that does speak volumes that you're going to hold on to this guy one more year after such an embarrassing performance. Kind of like Jason Garrett, they held on to him for a long time. But the fact that McCarthy's back, my initial reaction was a little frustration, a little confusion, and to be honest, I was pretty surprised. I didn't think he was coming back. I really didn't.
Would you have rather had Bill Belichick as your head coach this year?
It kind of makes you wonder because the talent in New England was not there, and neither was the performance. So it goes back to that argument where was it Brady? Was it Belichick? Who really knows? Because what has he done without Brady? Not a whole lot. Is Dallas more talented than the roster he had in New England? Without a doubt. Could he get us to that next level? Maybe we'll never know. I don't know. But to your point or to your question, I think I might rather have had Belichick than McCarthy back just to switch it up, just to do something different.
I also think, too, like, one thing Mike McCarthy has talked about since the decision to bring him back was announced is that he's not afraid of the stress of being on the final year of his deal. He's not afraid. That's not a factor with him. But I think it's interesting that I feel like we just keep adding things to his plate because not only does he have the stress of, hey, you all in this season, or if that, hand doesn't give you two kings, you're gone, to use the poker analogy. But not only that, fear or stress, which I think would be natural, even for someone who's saying he's not having it. But, oh, hey, by the way, the guy ready to take your seat at the poker table is one Bill Belichick, who we almost gave that seat to this past season. I wonder what's going on in Mike McCarthy's head when he hears this, and he probably is honestly throughout the years has done a good job of probably pushing that stuff aside, disassociating. I think if you're a head coach that long, you kind of have to a certain extent, but it's extremely interesting.
I got a question for you. So with all these rumors coming out and McCarthy on the last year of his deal, what would you define as a successful Cowboys season this year, so much so where you retain Mike McCarthy after this year?
It's a fantastic question, and I think the answer is elusive because we talked about it on our previous podcast about how Houston has been able to go from bad to good very, very quick, right?
Yeah.
And how difficult it is to go from good to great in the NFL. The Cowboys are good. They've been good. They're stuck at good. So is the barometer you got to get great? And by great, making an NFC championship game for the first time in 20 years, 30 years, excuse me. I think that externally, that has to be the barometer. But like, to your point, what if it's actually just making it past the wild card round and then, having a good showing against the 49ers in the divisional round? Like, is that enough for you, Danny, to ward off Bill Belichick as a potential replacement? Because otherwise, why wouldn't you just do the move this year?
Sure, and I get that, but it's pretty sad as America's team used to be the best team in football for years, dominated Super Bowl after Super Bowl. And to say that a successful season is, quote, a good showing in the playoffs is pretty pathetic if that's where we're at as Cowboy fans, where we're happy with a good showing. We're happy to make it as long as we don't get embarrassed so Stephen A. Smith can't tear us apart on Monday. That's a successful season. And if you're McCarthy, how can you really coach to the best of your abilities knowing that your job is on the line, Super Bowl or bust? And when it comes down to those, do I go for it on 4th and 2? Do I do this? It's like when your margin of error is so thin that your job could be gone like that, that's no way to coach.
I think that's a great point you brought up about how does Mike McCarthy actually handle the in-game coaching decisions of knowing that it's go all in or bust. That's a fantastic point. Something we'll obviously monitor throughout the season. Like to your point, what if it's a 4th and 3 situation on their own 40, week 1, they have a chance to, punt and just play safe or they have a chance to win the game and they do a fake punt all of a sudden and it gets stopped and next thing you know they lose the game. It's like that might be stemming back to going all in or not. That's a fantastic point, Danny. This is why you should listen to this podcast.
If he just goes into this season with the F it, like this is my last year, I'm going deep in the playbook, 4th and 3 on my own 35. Why not? Let's go for it. Maybe that's what the Cowboys need. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe that could be the difference that we're looking for.
I mean, it's interesting. All right, let's go to Joey Alberti. The reason I want to go to you, Joey, you're a Massachusetts guy. So you've been able to see up close the Bill Belichick era with Tom Brady, without Tom Brady. That's been your life as a football fan, is being around that. What were your reactions to this article? And then from a Cowboys perspective, I wonder if you thought what I thought was when Bill Belichick was an option. And I know some people will say that, two personalities, Jerry and Bill, couldn't work together. But in your story on it, you even included the note that Jerry said, I have no doubt that we could work together. I thought that could be the case too. Bill Belichick doesn't like the attention of media stuff. Jerry Jones loves it. I think that actually could work out well. Long question short, what were your reactions to the story from someone who's watched Bill Belichick your entire life?
Every time information like that comes out with Belichick, I'm surprised just because of how closed off he is and how close his inner circle is. So the Seth Wickersham does a fantastic job reporting on that stuff. He did with Deflategate, he did with the end of the season stuff this year, he did with this, along with the other guys that wrote this piece. But my initial reaction was, I don't understand why a team wouldn't take a shot. There's a lot of, especially up here in New England, a lot of people are not happy with Robert Kraft right now because of their relationship. And as it's stated in the article, and how Robert Kraft talked to Arthur Blank when Belichick was interviewing for that Falcon job, and was just like, I couldn't trust him. He's arrogant, whatever. And don't get me wrong, Bill Belichick, I'll go to the cons of Bill Belichick in a second, but it is clear that Robert Kraft, even though he wants to say he was trying to help Bill get this job and everything like that, he was not. And that relationship is not good at all. It is very bad between Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick. But at the same time, he's always done more with less. Granted, he doesn't need to find, he doesn't always try to find those really high-end, high-touted prospects. He just tries to find people that fit his scheme. And he always does a really good job at finding those specific, weirdly niche people. It obviously kind of hits himself. He messes up. I mean, you saw the Cole Strange draft pick a couple years back, and everyone was like, what the hell? And everyone was right because it didn't work out, or it hasn't so far. At the same time, I mean, and again, he won 6 Super Bowls. And granted, it was with Tom Brady. But what do you expect when older Cam Newton and a broken Mac Jones are your quarterback for the next 2-3 years? At the same time, you have to look at how he handled Mac Jones' second year, bringing Matt Patricia in and Joe Judge, 2 guys that were not well regarded outside of New England because of their head coaching stops. And both guys who didn't have a ton of experience on the offensive side of the ball. He brought those 2 guys back to run the offense, which was crazy. Everyone knew it was crazy from the beginning. everyone was like, what's going to happen? Like, this is so weird. And it probably ended up being worse than people expected. It was a disaster all around with Mac Jones. And I think that really played a big part into the reason of why he is who he is today, that being Mac Jones. So there's definitely that balance of like, he's done these amazing things, but when he's made these decisions and been arrogant because he likes just having the Patricias and the McDaniels and the Joe Judges and those guys around him, like it doesn't matter in what role, obviously, he just likes having them around him. Um, but he's won Super Bowls with all those guys. So it's kind of a weird toss up. And the one thing that I thought was interesting in the article is that in the interview with the Falcons, he talked about how he's willing to kind of give up some of that GM responsibility and allow the executives to make those decisions. He just wants to coach. But it also said in the article that Atlanta wasn't really buying that. And the Eagles, as you mentioned earlier, the Eagles took a look at him, but they weren't really buying that either. They know that if Bill Belichick is coaching this team, he's going to have a massive, massive influence on all the personnel decisions. So there's a balance of that totalitarianism, or however you say that word, of Bill Belichick and how that can go really wrong, which it did the past couple of years. But there's also, he's done spectacular things with that and just made teams that probably have no business being in the Super Bowl outside of Tom Brady that end up being in the Super Bowl.
Well, I also think it's interesting. Danny talked about how like maybe it's time to get a new GM for the Cowboys on our previous pod on what's on Morales' mind. To your point about Bill Belichick with the GM roles, I think my initial reaction was there's no way that it might work with Dallas because there's no way he would come in and usurp that power from Jerry and Stephen Jones, obviously, right? And Will McClay being there too. But maybe he might add something to their thinking that they might need. I think that that's a possibility, hypothetically, if you were to come in. I think one thing I keep coming back to, Danny, is that there's a reason Bill Belichick's not coaching this year. Is that his own decision? Is that other people's decision? If it's other people's decision, then let's look at the three teams mentioned and what they did. The Cowboys kept Mike McCarthy. The Eagles decided to keep Nick Sirianni after a very just convoluted, almost like toxic finish to the season. Like it didn't feel, I don't know if toxic is the right word, but
I think it's the perfect word.
It wasn't. There's the objectively, I'm not sure it's the right word. Subjectively, toxic. And then the Falcons decided to go with Raheem Morris, like who thought of but that's a guy that it's not Bill Belichick. So I just think it's interesting that if those three teams are so interested in him, why he's not head coaching. From a Cowboys perspective, and I'll let you hop in here, Danny, after this. The only thing from a Cowboys perspective is that maybe Jerry Jones truly wanted to go all in this season, meaning, hey, we have some guys on expiring contracts. I don't want to bring in a new coach that is now coaching guys on their expiring contracts only to watch them leave and then have to redo this next year. Maybe we just let this thing go fully in this year. If it doesn't work, then we blow it up. McCarthy's gone. Belichick comes in. But if it works, then we just keep it and move on, extend people, and yada, yada, yada. Maybe from a timing perspective, that's better. But I don't know. What do you think?
No, that does make sense. But I have a hard time seeing the Joneses giving up, like Joey alluded to, that personnel decision-making and giving the head coach so much power. Unless we're inside the building, we don't really know how much power McCarthy has or how much of a say Jason Garrett had that whole time. But if he truly is this great coach, then why is he not coaching? There's only 32 head coaching jobs in the world, in the NFL. And it's the 32, quote, what should be the best coaches. And if Belichick is really as good as everyone thinks that he is or was, why is he not coaching? There's got to be something under the surface that we just don't know about. There's something that's just not clicking with teams. Maybe his way is a dying breed and it's time for a new way of doing business. There could be something to that too. But
the Patriot way is legit. The Patriot way is a thing.
It was legit.
What I'm saying is the way that they operate is a thing. Like that is not like a delegitimate idea. They seem to be a little bit different in terms of how they handle people rather than other teams.
It seems very strict, like a lot. He runs like a much tighter ship than the rest of the NFL. And while that may work in college, that's tough to do, but it did work, so it's hard to say. But might be a little tougher to do with certain players in the NFL with these guys making millions, grown men, and you're going to tell them to run that tight ship like he's been doing. That might wear on some players too.
Yeah. Joey, do you got one more thought?
Yeah, I want to point out the two reasons that the article said and why Bill Belichick probably doesn't have a job right now. I think number one is because of that Patriot way that you were just discussing. And if they were to fire their head coach or just hire a new one, that would mean an uprooting of the entire system of whatever franchise it is. It doesn't matter what team. No team has the system that Bill Belichick would probably want in place. Granted, again, he said to the Falcons, like, I'm willing to kind of take a step back. Like, I just want to coach. That still means that there's going to be a big change involved. There would be a massive, massive change.
I don't think that that's enough to prohibit you from getting a coach who might be the best coach of all time.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But the second reason is, I think another indicator is he's looking for those 15 wins to pass Don Shula all time. He's 73 years old. How long is he really going to be coaching for? He wants those 15 wins. I'm not saying he's just going to split after those 15 wins, but you know his time isn't long. You're not hiring someone that has the chance to be a 10-year coach. He's not going to coach that long. At one time he said he wasn't going to coach into his 70s, and then look at him now. He's looking for a job at 73 years old. So you could just have a coach for 2-3 years. Granted, those could be really good 2-3 years, which I think would work well for the Cowboys and that like all-in mantra. But I think those are the two primary reasons as to why he doesn't have a job.
He turned 72. We're recording April 6th, 17th. On Tuesday, April 16th, he turned 72. So Joey, your entire take is off. Wrong. You're delegitimized. The third eye Raven has lost an eye. He'll
be 73 by the start of. No, he won't.
No.
Never mind. I'm in.
No.
There's 12 months in a year, Joey. Breaking news.
I thought it was 4.
How old do you think you are?
74.
Joey operates on dog years. All right. Well, I think it's fascinating. Another thing to just kind of log away for Cowboys coverage and stuff is, and I think maybe the best point about this whole thing was what Danny brought up about Mike McCarthy, whether the fact that he's on his last straw affects his coaching decisions. Maybe we talk more about that. How that would come out or how that would play out is going to be interesting, something to monitor. But anyways, that was a bonus episode of How About That podcast. Thank you for listening. Subscribe, share, review, do all the things. We're very appreciative of every single person who listens, and thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to How About That podcast.